I was 18 when my parents decided they were done with me. No big fight, no dramatic shouting, just a quiet dinner, a few words that sounded rehearsed, and then the kind of silence that only happens when something inside you breaks. I still remember the taste of that dinner. Burnt rice, a few pieces of overcooked chicken, and the stale air of disappointment. My father sat across from me, scrolling through his phone, pretending he wasn't about to ruin his son's life. My mother avoided eye contact, her lips pressed together like she was holding in guilt or relief. "Daniel," my father said finally, his voice flat, like he was discussing a business deal, "you've turned 18 now. You're an adult. It's time you start taking responsibility for your own life." I looked up, confused. "I already do," I said. "I've got a job at the store. I'm applying to colleges." He interrupted me. "We've decided it's best if you move out." The words didn't register at first. Move out? Like, now? He continued. "You're old enough to handle yourself. Your mother and I think it's time you learn what the real world is like." I turned to my mother. "Mom?" My voice cracked. "You agree with this?" She looked away, tears threatening to fall. "It's for your own good," she whispered. "You need to grow up." That night, I packed my things in silence. No one helped me. I didn't even know where I was going. Just stuffed my clothes, my books, and a few photos into an old duffel bag. When I closed the door behind me, I waited, half expecting my mother to stop me, to say this was just a lesson, a scare tactic. But she didn't. Neither of them did. They locked the door. That was the night I stopped being their son. For the first few weeks, I slept on friends' couches. I told them my parents had downsized and there wasn't room for me anymore. The lie hurt less than the truth. But soon, the couches ran out, and so did people's kindness. I ended up working double shifts at a convenience store just to afford a room in a run-down boarding house that smelled like cigarettes and regret. It was rough, but it was also the beginning of something. When you're forced to start from zero, you see people differently. I stopped expecting anyone to help me. I stopped expecting life to be fair. And somewhere in the middle of all that bitterness, I found clarity. I promised myself one thing. I'd never be powerless again. Not emotionally, not financially, not ever. I started small. I saved every spare dollar I could, lived cheap, took night classes, and eventually got into a local college on scholarship. I studied finance, not because I loved it, but because I understood what it meant. Control. People with money didn't get kicked out. They did the kicking. By the time I was 25, I had a degree, no family, and a growing sense of quiet anger that never really went away. I poured it all into work. First, a junior analyst job, then promotions, then investments. I studied markets like a language. I learned how people made mistakes and how to profit from them. Meanwhile, my parents faded into the background of my life. I didn't visit, I didn't call. They didn't either. Sometimes I'd hear through distant relatives that they'd sold their old car, or that my dad's business wasn't doing so well. Each update was like a cold breeze. I felt it, but I didn't care. They had chosen to erase me. I simply respected their decision. Years passed. I built a quiet, comfortable life. Not extravagant, just clean, minimal, efficient. Every piece of furniture, every item had a purpose. I liked control. I liked order. But one night, as I was browsing through real estate listings, something caught my eye. It was the house. The same one they'd kicked me out of 20 years ago. It was smaller than I remembered. Faded paint, cracked driveway, sagging fence. The price was lower than it should have been, a sign of desperation. And when I checked the ownership records, my heart gave a slow, measured beat. It was still in my father's name. I don't know why I smiled then. Maybe it was irony, maybe fate, or maybe revenge just has a way of finding its moment. I didn't buy it right away. I took my time, watched the market, made sure everything lined up. A few weeks later, the house went into pre-foreclosure. My father had defaulted on his mortgage. Perfect. Through a holding company, I bought the property. Clean, discreet, professional. They never even knew my name was behind it. The paperwork went through smoothly, and within a month, the house legally belonged to me. The same house that had once rejected me was now mine. A few days later, I drove there for the first time in 2 decades. The neighborhood felt smaller, older. The trees I'd climbed as a kid were now overgrown. The front porch creaked when I stepped on it. I rang the doorbell. My father opened the door. Time hadn't been kind to him. His once dark hair was now thin and gray, his shoulders hunched, his face drawn. For a moment, he didn't recognize me. Then his eyes widened. "Daniel?" he said, like he'd seen a ghost. "Hi, Dad," I said calmly. My voice didn't shake. "It's been a while." My mother appeared behind him, hand on the doorframe. She looked fragile, older than she should have been. "Daniel, is that really you?" I nodded. "It's me." There was a long silence, the kind that fills a room before something breaks. My father cleared his throat. "What brings you here?" he asked cautiously. "I came to talk about the house." His brows furrowed. "What about it?" "It's mine now." I handed him the envelope. "I bought it last week." He looked at the papers, confusion turning to disbelief. "That's impossible." "It's not," I said softly. "You defaulted. It went up for sale. I purchased it through a private holding company." My mother's hand trembled. You bought our house?" I met her eyes. "Your house? You mean the one you kicked me out of when I was 18? The silence after that was heavy, suffocating. My father's mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked small. I'd never seen him small before. "I didn't come here to gloat," I said quietly. "But legally, you need to vacate within 30 days. I'll give you that time." He stared at me like he wanted to say something cruel, something to remind me he was still his son. But he didn't. He just nodded, slow and defeated. I turned to leave, but before I did, my mother called after me. "Daniel, why are you doing this?" I paused, then looked back over my shoulder. "Because," I said, "you taught me how the world works." In the weeks that followed, I received updates from the property manager. My parents tried to fight the eviction legally, but there was nothing they could do. They had no savings, no leverage. The law was clear. 30 days later, they were gone. When I walked through the empty house again, I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not guilt, just a strange, hollow calm. The rooms were smaller than I remembered. The wallpaper was peeling. The air smelled like dust and faded memories. I went upstairs to my old room, the one where I used to read at night when the world outside felt too cruel. The same room where I'd packed my things and left. It looked almost the same, only older. I stood in the doorway for a long time, my mind drifting back to that night. I remembered the weight of the duffel bag on my shoulder, the sting of cold air when I stepped outside, the quiet echo of the door locking behind me. Now, 20 years later, the sound of my own footsteps echoed through that same hallway. I had become the silence they once left me in. For months, I rented the house out. It was just another property in my portfolio. Numbers, income, equity. But something about it bothered me. I avoided driving past it, avoided thinking about it. Until one evening, my property manager called. "Mr. Cole," he said, "the tenants are moving out. Would you like us to relist the property?" I hesitated, then said, "No, leave it vacant for a while." That weekend, I drove there again, alone. The sun was setting when I pulled into the driveway. I walked through the rooms slowly, touching the walls, feeling the weight of time pressing against them. In the living room, I found something I hadn't noticed before, a loose floorboard near the wall. I pried it open and found a small box inside. Inside the box were old photos of me. My graduation photo, some birthday pictures, even a drawing I'd made as a kid, folded neatly, kept safe. My mother had saved them. For a long time, I sat there, staring at those photos. I didn't cry. I don't think I could. But something inside me shifted. Not forgiveness, but understanding. They hadn't been evil, just weak, cowardly. They'd taken the easy way out. And maybe that's what I hated most. Not that they threw me out, but that they did it out of fear, not strength. A few months later, I found out through a neighbor that they were living in a small rental across town. My father's health was declining. My mother worked part-time at a local store. I could have helped them. One call, one transfer, one act of mercy. But I didn't. Revenge doesn't always look like fury. Sometimes it's just silence, the kind that leaves people alone with their choices. It's been 5 years since then. I still own the house, though I've never sold it. Sometimes I drive by, park across the street, and just watch it. The new tenants have kids. They play on the same lawn I once mowed every weekend for $5 of allowance. They laugh. Their parents smile. It's strange, watching happiness grow where pain once lived. I suppose that's the irony of it all. Revenge doesn't fix anything. It just restores balance, the kind that makes sense only to the person who was wronged. I don't feel victorious. I don't feel healed. But I do feel finished. People talk about closure like it's this beautiful, clean ending. It's not. It's just a moment when you stop caring, when the past loses its grip, and you finally see that justice and peace aren't the same thing. Sometimes justice is cold. Sometimes it's quiet. And sometimes it's just a man standing in front of the house that once cast him out, watching the lights turn on again, not with bitterness, but with the calm understanding that the cycle has finally closed. I still remember that night, the night they kicked me out, the way the door shut, the way my heart sank. But now, when I think about it,